Imagine if you were a 14 to 18-year-old young man on Rikers Island with 14,000 other inmates. You've come from a life of poverty. You've come from neighborhoods that none of us would want to live in. You've come from a home where there usually are no male role models. This is the clientele that is at Rikers Island. This is the clientele that we work with. Many have been in foster care their whole lives, many on public assistance, and the worst thing about them, they think they're stupid. They have very little self-worth, and the worst thing about them is they have little or no vision beyond their own circumstance, and they do not know a single person who can help them when they get out. Enter a young man who was lucky enough to grow up in a loving family and came from a small Pennsylvania iron and steel town, Johnstown, Pennsylvania. I did not do well in school when I first started out, so I went in the Navy for a couple of years, and then I came to New York City, where I got my undergraduate degree and my MBA. Now I ask you, what could possibly bring these two entities together? You all know the answer: volunteerism and an encore career. When I meet with these young men, I never talk to them about their past. All I'm concerned about is their future. What do they want to do with the rest of their lives? That is the only thing that concerns me. The first day I walked into the jail, I said to myself, what would happen if I could instill some hope? Martin Luther King said, without hope, there is nothing. So I had to instill hope, and I had to instill vision with respect to what would be available to them. This did not seem like rocket science work to me. I entered Rikers Island as a volunteer from a program in New York called Principal for the Day. And after I spent the first day there, the correction department came to me and they said, we don't know why they're listening to a white man in a suit, but they're listening to you. I made a joke. I said, well, my wife doesn't listen to me. My kids don't listen to me. Somebody's listening to me. That sounds good to me. And so I spent my one day and I went back to work. A year later, I went back to the Pencil organization, a wonderful organization in New York. Pencil stands for Public Education Needs the Involvement of Civic Leaders. And they said, your school's already been chosen. They want you back in jail. And I said, I would be glad to go. So back I went. And I met with the principal, and we talked about a program that I might begin with them. Went on vacation with my wife and one of her associates, and everybody agreed that I was the perfect candidate to start a not-for-profit. One of the things we talked to them about role models, and I talked to them about famous people. We were fortunate enough to visit South Africa 2 years ago, and I went in the steps of Nelson Mandela. And Mandela, when he was locked up for 27 years, there was only one thing he wanted to keep with him, and those were his books. And they have to understand that education is the key to their getting out from where they are. And so they have to enroll in school. And from day one, they have to do something. They have to write an essay. I let the first people in without any preconditions, and it was a big mistake. From that day on, I decided everything that I do will require them to do something. It's like I said in the video, it's an ROI. I learned it in business, and I learned it with them. So that everything that they do must be a step along the way. We have our first day at Getting Out and Staying Out, which is a great day when they first come out, and they get a new resume, which looks terrific. They get an electric alarm clock so that they arrive on time. They get Metro cards. I spend $40,000 a year on Metro cards in New York City. Do you know what it's like to get out and not have $2 to come to my office? You have to wait for your mother to get home from work. They can't even make it to the office. We have no idea because they're going back into neighborhoods that we can't possibly imagine. Every day that I go to the island is a day that I feel good about. The men that I bring in with me, retired senior volunteers, every person that I bring in there, they must shadow me for a month or so. So I have to make sure that they know how to talk with these young men. Because remember, nobody talks to these young men. They walk through our society with their do-rags and their jeans hanging down off their hips, and nobody speaks to them. All of a sudden, a businessman, a successful businessman, was talking to them about what does it take. There are 3 things that my guys say on every job interview that they ever go on. I'm a hard worker, I show up on time, and I don't take sick days. And they seem to believe that that isn't enough. And I tell them on an entry-level position, it is enough. What are they doing when they get out? They are continuing their education. They must agree to finish the GED. 40 of them are going to college. 40 guys are going to college. We give one scholarship a year. Ohio University, Athens, Ohio, has a college for the incarcerated. We had our first graduate come out just a month ago. He received an associate degree in science and is now in New York City, where he'll be applying to my alma mater, Baruch, next year. But you have to understand, our society is set up for these young men to fail, not succeed. 75% of all parole and probation violations are technical. They've showed up late for a meeting. They missed a curfew. For that, they get sent back for years. I don't spend a lot of time proselytizing and trying to change the laws. The draconian Rockefeller drug laws that we have in New York State and the other laws, fortunately we have organizations, sister organizations, who do that kind of work. I'm 72 years old, and I want to see it happen right now, just like you all do. In our seminar the other day, a lady mentioned something because Jim Emmerman said that we were all nice. And this woman said, we're not nice, we are troublemakers. Every one of us is a troublemaker. If you're not making trouble out there, you're not getting the job done. Because remember, you got into this thing because we had a problem. All right? So, I have a lot of people to thank tonight, but I'm going to limit my list very shortly to my friend Christopher Bell, who's here tonight from New York. He wrote my letter for nomination. Working with Alexandra and Jim over the past couple of months, I'm going to miss those conference calls, calling up but then that gave me the opportunity to meet some of my fellow winners tonight. And I must tell you, if you think the 6 of us are great, you should have seen the 9 last night. It's just phenomenal. And so I must say that the last person I'd like to thank is a woman I've been with for 47 years who's been in the world of not-for-profit, working with handicapped children. And I used to kid her for years about, what's that not-for-profit all about anyhow, working in a profit-making organization. I helped build the Brute fragrance. Many of you perhaps wore it years ago. I worked for Shiseido, I worked for Almay, and I worked for Yves Saint Laurent. And all of those successes, nothing comes close to when these guys walk into my office after spending years upstate, after achieving great jobs. I've got a guy in the cement business. He came out, Mr. G, I want to be a journeyman. How do you spell journeyman? What is a journeyman? He makes now $32 an hour with time and a half. He's making $75,000 a year. He was locked up less than 15 months ago. But he also knows about retention. If you work construction and they break down the job at the end of the job, the crew breaks down. He called me 6 months later. He said, Mr. G, buy me a beer. I got good news. When the crew got put back together again, his crew chief picked him first. So I learned all this at home. I learned it living with a social worker for 47 years who taught me what it takes to go every day and deal with clients. And I can tell you, I would not be standing here today if it wasn't for you, Arlene, because you gave me the inspiration. It wasn't about men being locked up. It was about children.